Wonder of the Wasteland, Chapter 20, Part 3. When he came to, the day had far advanced, and the sun, sloping to the west, was sinking behind the Panamints. Adam stumbled up, his muscles numb as if contracted and robbed of their elasticity. His thirst told the story of that day's heat, which had parched him, even while he lay asleep in the shade. Hunger didn't trouble him. Either he was weak from exertion or had suffered from breathing poisoned air or had lost something of his equilibrium. Whatever was wrong, it surely behooved him to get out of the lower part of the valley, up above the sea level to a place where he could regain his strength. To that end, he hunted for his burros. They were close by, and he soon packed them, though with much less than his usual dexterity. Then he started following the course of the running water. This Furnace Creek ran down out of a deep-mouthed canyon with yellow walls of gravel. The water looked like vinegar, and it was hot and had a bad taste, yet it would sustain life of man and beasts. Adam followed the lines of mesquites that marked its course up the gradually ascending floor of the canyon. He soon felt a loosening of the weight upon his lungs and lessening of air pressure. Twilight caught him a couple of miles up the canyon where a wide, long thicket of weeds and grass and mesquites marked the turning of Furnace Creek into the drab hills, and where springs and little streams trickled down from the arroyos. Up one of these arroyos, in the midst of some gnarled mesquites, Adam made camp. Darkness soon set in, and he ate by the light of a campfire. After he had partaken of food, he discovered that he was hungry. Also, his eyelids drooped heavily. Despite these healthy reactions and a deeper interest in his surroundings, Adam knew he was not entirely well. He endeavored to sit up a while and tried to think. There were intervals when a deadlock occurred between thoughts. The old pleasure, the old watchful listening, the old intimate sense of loneliness had gone from him. His mind did not seem to be on physical things at hand or on the present moment. And when he actually discovered that all the time he looked down toward the Death Valley, he exclaimed aghast, "I'm not there, I'm down. I'm not here, I'm down there." Gloomy and depressed, he rolled in his blankets, and he slept for 12 hours. The next day he felt better in body, but no different in mind. He set to work making a comfortable camp in spite of the fact that he did not seem to want to stay there. Hard work and plenty of food improved his condition. His strength of limbs soon rallied to rest and nourishment. But the strange state of mind persisted and began to encroach upon every moment. It took effort of will to attend to any action. Dismukes must be in this locality somewhere, according to the little map. But, though Adam remembered this and reflected how it accounted for his own presence there, he could not dwell seriously upon the fact. Dismukes seemed relegated to the vague future. There was an impondering, present imperative, something that haunted Adam yet eluded his grasp. At night he walked under the stars and could not shake off the spell. And next day, when in an idle hour he found himself walking again and again down the gravel-bedded canyon toward Death Valley, then he divined that what he had attributed to absent-mindedness was a far more serious aberration. The discovery brought about a shock that quickened his mental processes. What ailed him? He was well and strong. What was wrong with his mind? Where had gone the old dreaming content, the self-sufficient communion with all visible forms of nature, and the half-conscious affinity with all the invisible spirit of the wilderness? How strangely he had been warped out of his orbit. Something nameless and dreadful and calling had come between him and his consciousness. Why did he face the west at dawn, in the solemn white-hot noon, at the red sunset hour, and in the silently lonely watches of the night? Why did not the stars of the east lure his dreamy gaze as those in the west? He made the astounding discovery that there were moments, and moments increasing in number, when he did not feel alone. Someone walked in his shadow at noontide. At twilight, a spirit seemed in keeping with his wandering westward steps. The world and natural objects and old habits seemed far off. He found himself whispering vagrant fancies, the substance of which once he realized was baffling and disheartening. And at last he divined that a longing to return to Death Valley consumed him. "Ah, so that's it," he muttered in consternation. But why? It came to Adam then, the secret of the mystery. Excuse me. Death Valley called him. All that it was, all that it contained, all he had lived there, sent out insidious and enchanting voices of terrible silent power. The long shadow of that valley of purple shadows still enveloped him. Death, desolation, and decay. The appalling nudity of the racked bowels of the earth, the abode of solitude and silence where shrieked the furies of the midnight winds, and the grave of Magdalene Veery. These haunted Adam and lured him back with restless and insupportable claim. "Death Valley again? For me, I shall go mad," soliloquized Adam. At last his mind was slowly being unhinged by the forces of the desert. Excuse me. Some places of the earth were too strong, too inhuman, too old, and too wasted for any man. Adam realized his peril, and that the worst of his case consisted in an indifference which he did not want to combat. Unless something happened, a great intervening destructive agent, to counteract the all-enfolding trance-like spell of Death Valley, Adam would return to the Valley of Avalanches, and there he would go mad. And the very instant he resigned himself, a cry pierced his dull ear. Sharply he sat up. The hour was near the middle of the forenoon. The day was hot and still. Adam's pulses slowly quieted down. He'd been mistaken. The water babbled by his camp. Bees flew over with droning hum. Then as he relaxed, he was again startled by a cry, faint and far off. It appeared to come from up the canyon around the low yellow corner of the wall. He listened intently, but the sound was not repeated. Was not the desert full of silent voices? About this cry, though, there was a tangible reality that stirred Adam out of his dreams and his glooms. Adam went on and climbed up the gravel bank on the left side to a bare slope, and from that to the top of a ridge. His sluggish blood quickened. The old exploring instinct awoke. He had heard a distant cry. What next? There was something in the air. Then Adam gazed around him to a distance. Adam shuddered and thrilled at the beetling, rugged, broken walls that marked the gateway where so often he had stood with Magdalene Veery to watch the transformations of the dawn and the sunset in Death Valley. He descended to a level and strode on, looking everywhere, halting now and then to listen, every moment gaining some hold on his old self. He went on, slow and sure, missing not a rod of ground, as if the very stones might speak. He welcomed his growing intensity of sensation because it meant that he had either received a premonition or had reverted to his old self, or perhaps both. Adam plodded along this wide gravel wash with the high bronze sawtooth peaks of the funerals on the left and some yellow clay dunes showing their tips over the bank on the right. At length he came to a place that suggested a possible sloping of these colored clay dunes down into a basin or canyon. Climbing up the bank, he took a few steps across the narrow top, there to be halted as if he had been struck. He had been confronted by a tremendous amphitheater, a yellow gulf, a labyrinthine maze so astounding that he discredited his sight. Before him and on each side the earth was as bare as the bareness of rock, a mystic region of steps and slopes and slants, of channels and dunes and mounds, of cone-shaped, fan-shaped ridges, all of denuded, crinkly clay with tiny tracery of erosion as graceful as the veins of a leaf, all merging their marvelous hues in a mosaic of gold and amber, cream and yellow, of mauve and bronze cinnamon. How bleak and ghastly, yet how beautiful in their stark purity of denudation. Endless was the number of smooth, scalloped, and ribbed surfaces, all curving with exquisite line and grace down into the dry channels under the dunes. At the base of the lower circle of the amphitheater, the golds and yellows and russets were strongest, but along the wide wing moving away toward the abyss below were more vividly wonderful hues, a dark, beautiful mouse color on the left contrasting with a strange pearly cream on the other. These were striking bands of color, sweeping the eye away as far as they extended and jealously drawing it back again. Between these great corners of the curve climbed ridges of gray and heliotrope to meet streaks of green, the mineral green of copper, like the color of the sea in sunlight, and snowy traceries of white that were narrow veins of outcropping borax. High up above the rim of the amphitheater, along the battlements of the mountains, stood out the zigzag belt of rusty red from which the iron stain had run downward to tinge the lower hues. And above all this wondrous coloration upheaved the bare breast of the mountain, growing darker with earthy browns until the bold rampart of the peak, gray like rock, gleamed pale against the leaden blue sky. Low down through the opening of the amphitheater gleamed a void, a distant bottom of the bowl, dim and purple and ghastly with shining white streaks like silver streams, and this was Death Valley. End of chapter 20, part 3.